Good morning, everybody. Almost noon. This is Laura Backel from the Eastern Research Group. Welcome to the second of our webinar series on planning for clean water. We're going to get started here in just a minute with a poll question. So while everybody's gathering together, we'd like you to look over this poll question. Just let us know where you're tuning in from this morning.
I think we're going to hit all 50 states here, Laura, with the others, looking at the comments.
All right, that's exciting. So I'm seeing, Minnesota, Florida, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Ohio. Oh, that's great. New Orleans, South Carolina. Wow, that's really cool. Anybody else?
I'd be interested to see
Washington State. That's it's early. Okay, I hope the person from Washington State has coffee. What was that, Andrew? What were you saying?
I said, I think the others may take it in terms of the majority of the participants. We'll have to see what the poll results are.
Tennessee. Yeah, I wish I had some Washington State coffee. That'd be nice. All right, I think we can close it down. Okay, let's see. So we have folks from within the Chesapeake Bay watershed: New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and Virginia, West Virginia. And then other, we have 12%, Andrew. 12% are other. So yeah, we've got a big reach today. That's pretty cool. Thank you. Okay, just a bit of an overview on the webinar today to tell you what we're going to be talking about. Obviously, this is being recorded, so you know that. We've got AICP continuing education accreditation, and just so you know, you get 1 CM for sustainability for attending today. So make sure that you get that credit if that's something that you're interested in doing. And up on the screen is the information on how to log that credit. We'll do that at the end of the webinar again. We're going to do a little housekeeping next, but before we do, I just want to let you know how things are going to work today. We'll have a welcome from Andrew. Then we'll have some presentations. We'll have panel questions and answers. And then we'll talk about the next webinar. So pretty straightforward today. So I think next we're going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Martina, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Just real quick, this is a reminder, as Laura mentioned, that this webinar is being recorded as we record all the others and will be posted on YouTube afterwards. If you joined us for the first one, you'll remember that we did send out an email post-webinar that included all the presentation materials, the resource links, and a link to the YouTube recording where you can watch this or share this recording. Has all the information about the CMs or the floodplain management credits, all that information. So we will do the same with this one again. If you have any questions throughout the webinar for our presenters, I encourage you to put those in that Q&A box, you'll see that at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat, raise hand, and a Q&A box. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, because what that does is it allows us to track those for our presenters for the Q&A session at the end. Sometimes when you put questions in the chat box, they get lost as people are talking and chatting with each other, and I don't want to lose your questions at the end. So please put those in the Q&A box at the bottom. Also, feel free to chat along with your colleagues and chat with each other, share comments. But also when we get to the Q&A session, we also encourage you to use the raise the hand icon. And what you can do is we can call on you and it'll allow you to unmute and turn your camera on if you like, but also just unmute and ask your question live one-on-one with our presenters. Sometimes it's easier to ask your question live than type a whole paragraph in that Q&A box. So by raising your hand, we will give you the permission to unmute and interact live with our presenters. So we encourage you to do that. If you have any issues throughout the session, feel free to send me a message in the chat and I'm happy to help. But I am just here for support services and thrilled that we can help with this webinar series. So thanks, Laura.
You bet. So again, just for today's agenda, we're going to have a welcome from Andrew Hopewell. We're going to talk a little bit about what plan integration is. We'll have some panel presentations from Debbie Carpenter, Beth Groth, and Kurt Smith. Then we'll have a bit of a discussion, and then we'll talk about some resources. So here's the second poll question before we get started. Could you let us know what sector you work in? We had quite a range on the first one, so let's see what we get with this one. And while we're waiting for the poll results to come in, I'd like to introduce Andrew Hopewell. Andrew is Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Culpeper. He has traditionally focused on long-range and comprehensive planning, including capital, fiscal, and economic impact analysis, demographic studies, as well as community visioning and plan development. Previously, he had a similar focus while working in Fauquier and Spotsylvania counties. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics and history from Wesleyan University, a master of urban and regional planning from the University of California, Irvine, as well as additional graduate studies within the University of California system. He is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and Andrew is also the APA Virginia chapter's president. So we think we're ready to close down this poll and see what we've got. All right, looks like most folks are from local government. We've got quite a few people from state government too. We've got regional, federal, private sector, nonprofit, academic. Let's see what we've got on other. Get anything on that? Associations. Yep, great. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. Get started.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Before we get into this, I'm going to take this opportunity as the Virginia chapter president to plug our upcoming conference this summer. Wanted to just let everyone know we are currently accepting submissions for session proposals as well as nominations for awards. So if you have something or your locality is doing something you think is worthy to share, or your firm's doing something worthy of share, we'd love to hear about it. Either in a session proposal or potentially for recognizing it through an award. So again, thank you, Laura, for the introduction. Thank you for giving me that second to do the shameless plug for the Virginia chapter here. We're pleased to be part of the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration, which is part of the group that's helping to bring this series of Chesapeake Bay themed webinars to planners throughout the region. And it's my pleasure this afternoon for us, for morning for some of you, to get to introduce this webinar and talk a little bit about what is plan integration. And I think it's something that a lot of us intuitively have a sense of, but really need to stress the importance of to ensure that sort of everybody's moving in the same direction and you've got plans that are syncing up with one another and providing essentially common direction and common guidance. So to sort of in a more formal definition, plan integration is the process by which communities look critically at their existing planning framework and align efforts with the goal of building a safer and smarter community. It should involve really the two-way exchange of information and incorporation of ideas and concepts between, in what we're talking about today, the hazard mitigation plans, sort of both at the state and local levels, and other community plans. So specifically looking at plan integration involving the incorporation of hazard mitigation principles and actions into those community plans and community planning mechanisms and into hazard mitigation plans. So it should be specific to the particular community that you're working in, and depending on the vulnerability of your existing built environment. Where we have these community-wide integration, it supports risk reduction through these various planning and development measures, both before and after a disaster. So when you're involving your community, you want to be looking at the plans at all the different levels, as the diagram is depicting here, the policies, the codes, the programs, and looking at all the different roles and the people who are involved in government, as well as the private sector, in implementing these plans. The successful integration occurs through the collaboration amongst these diverse stakeholders. And really, there's two primary ways to effectively accomplish this integration. The first is to integrate the natural hazard information and mitigation policies and principles into the local planning mechanisms and vice versa. So that involves including the information on natural hazards, identifying the hazard-prone areas throughout a community, and developing appropriate goals, objectives, policies, and projects. And then the second is to encourage that collaborative planning and implementation and interagency coordination by involving key community officials with the authority to execute the policies and programs and collaborating across departments. And so the goal of it at the end of the day is really to effectively integrate the plans and policies across disciplines and agencies in your community by considering the potential of hazards as one of the key factors in future development. So Laura, if we could move on to the next slide, you can see here, why it's important, because it's bringing together a commonality. It's looking at these different aspects and how they interact with each other and how they combine with one another. So combining that physical vulnerability component with a social vulnerability component to really be able to target your policies to where they're going to have the greatest impact for your local community. So, your ultimate objectives are to integrate the mitigation into areas such as land use, transportation, climate change, sustainability, natural and cultural resource protection, watershed management, and economic development, to be able to solicit more participation and provide an opportunity for various departments within local governments and communities to work together on a regular basis. And finally, to really help better define the roles of and improve the coordination between all the different players within the fields. So that's the broad high-level introduction to it. The great thing today is that we've got a couple of really terrific examples to be able to show you of how this has played out in practicality. So with that, I'm going to introduce, we're going to do our poll question, then then I'll introduce.
Do one more poll.
Yep.
We can actually segue into introductions while we're doing the polls. So thanks, Andrew, for that incredibly concise and really great overview on plan integration. Just to get a sense of where folks are at in terms of what plans they have responsibility for in your jurisdiction, what plans you might be looking at for plan integration, we wanted to put up this poll question. Which of the plans does your jurisdiction have responsibility for? So if you can give us a quick idea of which of these plans might be available to you to look at for integration, that'd be very helpful. And I don't know if you want to go ahead and introduce folks, Andrew, while we're waiting for that, or you want to wait till the poll closes, but I'll hand it over to you.
I think we've got so much great information to share today that I'll take advantage of the opportunity to multitask and go ahead and introduce our presenters at this time while folks are responding to that poll. Our first presentation has two presenters. The first is Deborah Carpenter, AICP, who serves as the Director of Charles County Development of Planning and Growth Management in Maryland. She's got over 26 years of experience in the planning industry. She has a master's degree in geography from West Virginia University and a bachelor's degree in environmental analysis and planning from Frostburg State University. Deborah serves on the Maryland Sustainable Growth Commission from 2015 to 2020 and is a member of the national and state chapters of the American Planning Association, as well as the Maryland Association of Counties Planners Affiliate. She also serves as the chair of the board of directors for the Resilience Authority of Charles County, a nonprofit government instrumentality whose purpose is to finance climate resilience and sustainability initiatives. And she's going to be joined in the first presentation by Beth Groth. Beth is the Climate Resilience and Sustainability Officer for Charles County Government in Maryland. She began her career with Charles County in 2006 as a planner and has been leading several climate initiatives for the county, including the development of a countywide climate resilience action strategy, a military installation resilience review for Naval Support Facility Indian Head and the town of Indian Head, as well as an upcoming climate action planning process. And then our second presentation today is going to have a Virginia focus and be led by Kurt Smith. And Kurt serves as the Deputy Director of the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, which is the regional government organization for the rural coastal communities of Virginia's Middle Peninsula. He's got over a decade in planning and community development experience and degrees in coastal geology. He has served in an advisory capacity on numerous state committees related to coastal resilience and natural resource management, and worked to develop the MPPDC's innovative Fight the Flood Resilience Implementation Program that we're going to learn a little bit more about, which was launched in 2020. So Laura, I'll turn it back to you just to see which plans our attendees have some authority over, and then we'll move on to the presentation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it looks like plan integration is a good topic. We've got comprehensive plans, watershed implementation plans, hazard mitigation plans, parks and rec, transportation, CAPS, capital improvements, environmental plans. Wow, that's quite a range. So this is a useful topic for everybody today, I can tell. So we're going to move on to the presentations, and I'll stop sharing and turn it on over to Beth, I believe is going to go first.
Beth is going to put up our slides for us, I believe. And I'm going to give you a little introduction. So I'm Debbie, and I'm very pleased to be able to speak with you today. Just a quick word on what to expect from us before I hand the reins to Beth. Beth will give you an overview of how Charles County has created a holistic approach to climate change and incorporated that philosophy not only into our planning division, but throughout county government. When she concludes, I will take over to give you more insight about a specific tool in our toolbox, the Resilience Authority of Charles County, and further delve into a specific project of the authority and how it intentionally incorporates an equity component. First, let me give you some geographical context. Charles County is south of Washington, D.C., in an area of the state known as Southern Maryland. Southern Maryland is comprised of 3 counties, Charles, Calvert, and St. Mary's, and can be visualized as an upside-down triangle. The top of the triangle is where Washington, D.C. sits. The western side is flanked by the Potomac River, and the eastern side by the Chesapeake Bay, with the tip of the triangle being where these 2 water bodies collide. The land on this triangle has little elevation change and a high water table. As a result, this area is particularly susceptible to the effects of climate change. With that context firmly in your minds, I'll now hand this presentation to Beth.
Thank you, Debbie. Good afternoon, everyone. Trying to get my slide to switch. It's not going. There we go. Okay. So before I get into kind of our plan integration, I wanted to first talk about the importance of a whole of government approach when it comes to both resilience and equity. And about 3 years ago, the county, I would say, was literally at a crossroads. After 2018, which was record rainfall year for Charles County with about 64 inches of rain. So it's about 20 inches more than our average annual rainfall. And also a major storm that occurred in July of 2019 that brought about 3 to 4 inches of rain to not only our county, but the region in a very short amount of time. And this caused major urban flooding. And so our department and also our county commissioners were receiving multitudes of complaints in this, over a couple of years time frame for flooding and drainage issues. Extreme weather in the last few years has really brought to light many of the issues with the fact that Charles County is, as Debbie said, a relatively low-lying county with a high water table. And like many jurisdictions, much of our stormwater infrastructure is older, it's failing, or it's undersized for this extreme rainfall, or it doesn't even exist at all. It may predate our stormwater regulations. So what's important is really that you have support from the top down to prioritize climate resiliency and sustainability. Charles County has really made huge strides in the last few years on our climate initiatives, thanks to our leadership. In addition to our county administrator, Mark Belton, who spearheaded a lot of our current programs and initiatives, we also have great support from our Board of County Commissioners. And they've demonstrated their support by building capacity or starting to build this capacity at Charles County government. So by initially this first bullet here, the creation of our Resilience Authority, I'm not going to go into details of this, but the commissioners took action to create this authority. And this was a huge step for Charles County to put resilience at the forefront of our work. Reorganizing, the county administrator is creating a new construction project management department, which will be focused on projects and especially those that are resilience based. And my position, the Climate Resilience and Sustainability Officer position, this is a new position that was created this last budget season in May. And I have been with the county, as they mentioned, for about 15 years. And so I have a lot of knowledge of the county. And so I've done a lot of this work in the past, but now I'm able to focus on it full time. And that's really a key, that there are people who can really put their time and effort into this work, because that's really necessary, especially with the climate challenge that we have in front of us. And our Chief Equity Officer position, which is also a fairly new position. And hang on one second here while I switch my notes. So it was created about 1.5 years ago, and the role of our Chief Equity Officer is to provide resources to staff to help us all learn about racial equity, but also to assist departments in making sure that our programs and our services for our residents that we offer are equitable. And it's important to consider equity in everything we do at Charles County. And then this positive response from the bond rating agencies. Many of you have, I'm sure, as jurisdictions go through these bond rating processes. And for the last 2 years, Charles County has basically been, Standard & Poor's has cited Charles County's efforts to combat climate change in their analysis and rationale for reaffirming our AAA bond rating. So ensuring that your jurisdiction is being proactive about climate change will likely be necessary for communities to maintain their good bond ratings moving forward into the future. Climate smart workforce. This is really key, I think, in terms of ensuring that resilience and plan integration and everything is really considered holistically. So a number of our staff have gone through the Maryland Climate Leadership Academy that the Association of Climate Change Officers created with the state of Maryland. And so this is a model program that other states are now starting to implement as well. And so this gives our staff the basic knowledge about climate change to help them make decisions on a daily basis in their work. And then we also identified 83 of our 822 full-time permanent positions, those that really require this climate competency. So it is now a requirement on their job descriptions, and we're in the process of developing training that will assist them in meeting that requirement. And again, it's really necessary for staff to have an understanding of climate change and know exactly how to, what to do in their daily work and how to incorporate and make decisions that are important for the future, especially as we now see extreme weather events and things that are not going to get any easier or better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our planning efforts that the reason why we really kind of jumped into resilience and making sure that we're becoming more resilient for the future. So we participated in a climate resilience planning and financing effort for Maryland counties that involved Charles, Anne Arundel, and Queen Anne's. It was a collaborative effort. The leadership at Charles County was really the driving force behind the county's participation in this effort. Mark Belton, our county administrator, saw the opportunity for us to begin the process of creating a plan for how to deal with the impacts of climate change that we are already experiencing, like extreme weather. And as I mentioned, it's this collaborative effort with the 3 counties, which we are all very similar in structure. We're bound by water on, basically most of our sides, and just experiencing mostly flooding issues and have some pretty significant flooding issues. So we're all very similar, and we're experiencing the same kinds of climate impacts. So, but it was a collaborative learning opportunity for all of us to get together and learn how to deal with our problems. So through the effort, each county created a climate resilience work group, and it's comprised of approximately 10 subject matter experts from multiple departments at county government, including planning and growth management, emergency services, public works. And now that group exists, it's one that we can call on to support overall resilience projects and initiatives at any time. And so the group identified climate hazards and impacts, and our top ones are, of course, extreme weather, extreme temperatures, primarily heat, flooding, both coastal nuisance and urban, and sea level rise. And then armed with this information, the group worked through a vulnerability assessment and identified assets, concerns, and challenges for Charles County. And this included infrastructure such as roads and bridges, critical operations facilities, natural environmental features, water resources, social and cultural aspects, including vulnerable populations. And then finally, we created a prioritized action strategy. And this is basically how to address our assets and make them more resilient for climate change. So it really laid the foundation for an overall resilience plan, and the county will be embarking on a climate action planning process, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then another effort that we're really doing right now is this Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation Military Installation Resilience Review for Naval Support Facility Indian Head and the town. It was a grant opportunity, and we're in the process of identifying climate risks and establishing mitigation strategies for those risks. They're not, Indian Head's not necessarily experiencing acute risks right now, but in the long term, they definitely will. So the goal is really to strengthen ongoing engagement between the county and NSFIH for long-term resilience. So collaboration, which I have just in a number of the projects initiatives that I do, collaboration has really risen to the top as something that is necessary. All these challenges are things that your neighbors to your southwest, northeast, it doesn't matter. Most of us are going to experience these kinds of impacts, and so collaborating and ensuring that we all are working together on solutions is really key. So a couple of planning efforts that we really have started to integrate resilience into our hazard mitigation plan. We just updated it in 2018 and we're getting ready to update it again. And it did consider climate change this time around. Our nuisance and urban flood plan identified and prioritized 57 frequently flooded locations. It was a mandate from the state to incorporate this into our hazard mitigation plan. We went a step further because the nuisance plan was actually what was required. We took a step further and also incorporated urban flood locations because we're dealing with such issues in our development district with that. Shoreline management plan, we recently did that a few years ago and identified 153 shoreline sites in need of restoration. And the study did also consider sea level rise. And as I mentioned, our upcoming climate action planning process, this is going to be a sort of a roadmap that the county is going to follow for how to address climate change, both resilience and mitigation in the future. So it will involve the creation of a climate resilience plan, a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and a mitigation plan, both for county government operations and for the community. So those are some of the plans that ways that we've integrated. It's just, you know, the main thing is that everybody just needs to be thinking about this and doing what you can. Everybody is strapped for staff capacity. And I would just say that, you know, little by little, take bites and chunks and stabs at what you can in terms of getting and considering climate change in your various plans. That's really the first step, and you may not be able to do it all at once, but this is the approach that we've been taking. And, you know, little by little, we are bringing our plans up to, you know, what they need to incorporate and consider climate change. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Beth. As you can see, Charles County's approach to climate change is comprehensive. I dare say we are ahead of the curve in this area, and I can almost hear some of you thinking, how in the world did they accomplish this when I struggled to get my local government to even acknowledge the science of climate change at all? I've been in planning at the local government level for 26, almost 27 years, and I get it. Buy-in from the elected officials is a precious commodity. I didn't always work in a place where this concept was embraced. So how did we conquer that here? We focus on common problems and a common goal to help our citizens have the best quality of life. We ensure the discussion and action is based on tangible benefits, not theoretical or abstract debates. Our commissioners and our citizens respond to that focus. And as a result, we get things done. We have the freedom to be innovative, and we win awards for that. At the Maryland Association of Counties Summer Conference this past year, we were presented with an award for our climate change efforts. As he gave his acceptance speech, our Commissioner President Reuben Collins made these remarks. Global warming is real. Climate change is real, and government's response should not be an ideological exercise. Garnering that level of strong support from your electeds is a key to success. Next slide. One of the most innovative and noteworthy tools in our climate change toolbox is the formation of the Resilience Authority of Charles County. In 2020, the Maryland General Assembly passed Senate Bill 457, authorizing counties in Maryland to create a resilience financing authority, whose purpose would be to accelerate infrastructure financing, reduce the cost of implementation, and mitigate and manage the risks of climate change. I'm happy to say Charles County was the first county in the state to take advantage of the opportunity. We created and adopted Bill 2020-07 on December 8th, 2020. The authority functions as a separate nonprofit entity, but also as an instrumentality of the incorporating local government. An independent board of directors was appointed on February 23rd, 2021. The board includes the directors of planning and growth management and fiscal and administrative services. In fact, I currently serve as the chair of the authority's board of directors. In addition, the board has a legal representative currently provided by the county from our county attorney's office. As they get more established, it is within their purview to hire their own legal counsel if they see fit. Also, the county's climate resilience and sustainability officer, Beth, acts as staff support to the authority and, in fact, gives a report on the status of the county's climate initiatives at their quarterly meetings. We are currently looking to hire an executive director for the authority, and even in that, we are being innovative. We are pursuing the possibility of an intergovernmental personnel agreement. Such an agreement provides for the temporary assignment, in our case, 2 to 3 years, of personnel between government entities. We are looking at the dual benefit that will arise from someone at the state level working at the local level for our authority. The knowledge they gain will better enable the state to assist and support authorities in other counties. Next slide. So why an authority? There are many advantages, but here are some of the most notable. An authority can adopt their own procurement process and therefore potentially get projects moving in a faster and more efficient manner than government can. Not saying that local governments are inefficient or anything. We all know governments are great, but just in case, they could move faster. Local governments have a debt ceiling policy, which limits the number of projects we can have underway at any given time. This also means that resilience projects are not competing against other projects in the county's capital program. The authority would also be eligible for certain grants that local governments cannot compete for. One of my favorite advantages is that the authority exists outside of the political arena. This has two major benefits in my mind. One, I work for the government, and no matter how many times I say I'm from the government and I'm here to help, it's never received well and people don't tend to believe me. So they have a greater ability to get things done as an authority simply because there is not a natural distrust for nonprofits like there is for government entities. Secondly, the authority is more likely to tackle projects on a merit basis, uninfluenced by the swings of political power, or which areas of the county may have the most influence on an election. Also, an authority is primed and built to be innovative. They can look at creative project management and or financing opportunities that might make our finance departments and government a bit twitchy. Solutions like revolving loans, P3s, pay for performance models, and combining various sources of funding are all possibilities that rarely get pursued by governments. The authority is scalable based on need and demand, and they are the nexus of climate competency, identifying multiple sources of revenue and opportunities. Next slide. Overall, the project focus of the Resilience Authority of Charles County is on residential stormwater drainage improvement and on high priority projects identified in the Nuisance and Urban Flood Plan, as well as all projects that address climate change. They will use a range of financing structures and funding techniques to leverage public and private investment. They have received base operating funds from the Charles County Board of County Commissioners. They can pursue grants, and they may periodically issue and sell bonds. They can also collect fees for services, but they do not have the authority to tax. I also want to note that our commissioners had decided to take a sizable chunk of the ARPA funds that were granted to the county and designate them for resilience efforts as well. Next slide. So we did it. We created bylaws, adopted procurement and other policies. We incorporated the 501c3. We hold quarterly meetings that abide by the Open Meetings Act. We formed subcommittees as needed, and they can meet more frequently, but only the entire board can vote on an action during an open meeting. All documents, agendas, and minutes are available to the public at the website listed on the screen. If that's too long to remember, I always tell people to go to the Charles County Government main page. There's a link directly to the Resilience Authority page on our main page under the Our County tab. Next slide. I'd like to close with one of my favorite topics, the Resilience Authority's first major project addressing private stormwater concerns. So let me start by letting you know that the Department of Planning and Growth Management has a slightly different structure than a lot of the planning agencies, because a lot of people hear me say Director of Planning, blah, 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 and they think I have a planning department. But in Charles County, our PGM structure has 4 divisions, and they include an administrative division that handles customer service and permit processing, codes, permits, inspection services, planning, and transit. So all of these entities tend to overlap and work very well together, but it also means that the same problem tends to hit a lot of different areas. And stormwater was one of those areas. As I mentioned in the beginning, our area is fairly flat, surrounded by water with a high water table. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to deduce that we might have some stormwater problems, and we do. A lot of them are on private property, and as Beth had said, with older, aging infrastructure or infrastructure that might just not exist. So our current code says if it's on private property, then it is the private property owner's concern. However, because the concerns are so large and expensive, the residents really can't afford to fix these things. So what happens is every time there's the pitter patter of little raindrops, it is not a comforting sound to anyone in government, because it means that we get a lot of phone calls from very angry people saying, fix our problems. And we simply don't have the authority. And it's a very extremely expensive fix. So enter the Resilience Authority that we thought might be a way to get some of these done. We have an eye to fix county stuff, the private stuff, and acquire the easements when we do it, so that the county will take over maintenance on these projects as they get fixed to ensure that in perpetuity, these things don't happen again. So under current regulations, this would be happening, but because all these neighborhoods didn't fall under these regulations, that structure wasn't in place. So the aim is to put that structure in place. But the problem was when we decided that this was a possibility, we had to figure out where to start. So we have a list of about 100 neighborhoods that predate the stormwater regulations and that have known problems. Which one do we tackle first is the question, because everyone thinks that their project and their problem should be number one. How do we decide? So we devised the prioritization project. It began last month. The authority hired a third party to assess those neighborhoods. The project has 3 phases. We are currently in the exploratory phase, which is data gathering and fieldwork. The second phase is the most exciting to a geeky mind like mine, and that is the predictive phase. And I'll go into that a little bit more, but I wanted to touch on the third phase. It's also exciting to me, and that involves creation of a dashboard so that everything we do is transparent and available to the public. So back to that second phase of creation of a suitability model. It will take into account up to 10 criteria and weight them. Included in the criteria are severity, how bad is it? Cost to repair, are we talking thousands or are we talking millions for this particular fix? Are there co-benefits? And by that, I mean, can we get MS4 credit? Does it happen to be at a place where mitigation would benefit a town or state entity, perhaps, which could lead to a cost share kind of arrangement? But one of the most important criteria is equity. We plan to address this using the Social Vulnerability Index from the CDC. So why is this important? Well, some neighborhoods may have a severe problem, but they're not going to have money to throw at it. There might be a great big old distrust of government. There might be problems with a language barrier. So notoriously, these areas are poor and they're more racially and ethnically diverse. I believe, this is my personal opinion, I think historically it wasn't that these neighborhoods were disadvantaged on purpose. I think government historically has been leaning towards expediency. What can we do quickly and what's going to cost us the least amount of money that we can get it done in? And when you have an affluent neighborhood that says, hey, here's some money and here's our easements and just go for it. But you have another neighborhood where you know you're going to have to hire an interpreter and you're going to have to make some extra effort and you're going to have to build relationships and you're going to have to build trust. That becomes an issue and that's harder. But it's important in this day and age to be intentional about helping those neighborhoods and making that extra effort. And so that's what's incorporated into this thing. So the next steps that we're looking at is to complete this by the end of this calendar year, start going down that list that is made, acquire the funding, acquire the easements, move to engineering, design, and construction, and then ensure that we can do this again and again and again. And that is all from us. Any questions?
Thanks, Debbie. We're going to go ahead and move to Kurt. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A chat so we can take those up at the end of the presentation. So Kurt, take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Is the presentation showing up well? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so it must be showing up. So good afternoon.
Not seeing it.
You're
yeah,
not?
It's not up, I'm afraid.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, hang tight. Try something different. How about now?
If you go up to the top and hit display settings and hit swap at the top in your top left corner, see it says display settings. Okay. And hit swap presenter view. There you go. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, as was said, my name is Kurt Smith. I work for the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, and just some real quick background on our agency and our efforts with regards to flooding and sea level rise implementation. We are a subdivision of the Commonwealth. We've been around for about 50 years. We have 9 member jurisdictions, 6 counties, 3 towns, and we are a largely rural coastal area, surrounded by an urban crescent stretching from Hampton Roads to Richmond, upwards to Fredericksburg in Northern Virginia. And we show up on the wrong end of all the lists of vulnerable areas in Virginia. We're one of the most vulnerable areas in Virginia with regards to flooding and sea level rise. And we're in that hot spot of the second fastest sea level rise rates in the nation. We are predominantly a grant funded agency. We're very small. We have very limited capacity. We have, between myself, our executive director, and another planner, that is our capacity we have on staff. We are predominantly grant funded, and we're very active in the grant space, and we've been conducting a number of plans and studies over the course of the last 10 to 15 years. And what I'm going to talk to you about today, our Fight the Flood program, is overseen by a program design which is built on all of those studies and plans. So we truly have integrated and moved into the doing space. We've leaned into it wholeheartedly. And so some quick background on how the Fight the Flood program came to be. Like I said, we had countless plans and studies on the books that all said the same thing. They all showed our region, large swaths of our region going underwater. It just painted the dire picture that all of us are so familiar with. We watched the literal and figurative erosion of our rural tax base. Every locality, every reassessment cycle, we were losing tens of millions of dollars in taxable revenue that keeps the most fundamental of government services going. And for our rural localities, local government in many instances is the largest employer in that locality. So we watched all these things unfold, and we knew the breadth of the problem at hand here, and the rate at which all of this is coming to us. All of these problems are unfolding. And we looked at the traditional model of what was actually being done on the ground about any of this, and it just, quite frankly, was inadequate. And our commissioners agreed, our member jurisdictions agreed. They wanted less talk and more actions. Our local government's also being strapped for cash and for staffing capacity essentially turned the keys over to us, and they said, build us solutions and tools. And we've incorporated all that into the Fight the Flood program, which we launched in 2020. The intent here is to protect the tax base. So when you look at plan integration and short and long-term resilience, through that lens of protecting the tax base, you get a very different approach. And that's what I'm going to explain here to you today. We also tried to do it in a more dynamic way. We wanted tools that address the immediate needs that, I call them Band-Aid projects, where we're getting more shorelines protected, things like that. But we have many areas that are in need of managed retreat, and we needed tools that approached that accommodated that managed retreat simultaneously. We need to be working on short and long-term issues simultaneously. And so that is what Fight the Flood is. Here's the website. It's all web-based, and all that background's fine, but what is it? And so it's just that. It's we call it a vertically integrated economic machine for flooding and coastal resilience. It's really a one-stop shop for anybody that lives or works in the Middle Peninsula, and it's created a toolkit to advance projects. Less talking, more doing, and to date we've been successful in leveraging almost $12 million into this space, which for a small rural area like ours is pretty awesome. That's no small feat to get that kind of money flowing into a small area. Oh, and I wanted to mention something too. As we built this in a modular format so that this could be replicated in any community. So just keep that in mind, that this is scaled to fit to meet any community's needs. It's a financing machine. Like I said, we needed to build tools to be able to drive projects. In 2011, the Virginia General Assembly enabled localities to create living shoreline revolving loan funds. To date, in the Commonwealth, we're the only such fund active of its kind. We're capitalized up to $3 million, where we can fund living shoreline projects and septic repairs. These are all things that homeowners cannot get financed through banks easily. So these kind of loan funds are critical if you're truly in the doing space. And for us, another important aspect of the Middle Peninsula is the vast majority of property, especially the property that's at risk to flooding, is privately owned. So the traditional models seem to be largely focused on public projects, but the vast majority of the problems on privately owned. So you need private property solutions, and that we've really prioritized that as well. We want to influx as much grant money into this space as we can. We're constantly seeking grant funds and incentivizing this entire process with grants. Right now, we've got one small grant that's actually some Hurricane Florence disaster money that's for living shorelines in a specific geographic area. So we've got this program built both ways, where people can register for their needs, but we can also come meet them. If we have grant funds that need to be expended for a specific purpose in a specific area, everybody who's registered in that specific area for those things has just won the lottery. We have the ability to go to them and say, do you want a living shoreline from the government? Which is a pretty fascinating and unprecedented discussion. It's a resiliency invocation machine. We're getting grants to drive innovative practices and solutions for all these challenges that we're facing. Right now, we've got about $1.5 million in state economic development money that's going to a series of their awards as part of a small business competition for innovative solutions to challenges along the lines of stormwater management, housing design, innovative reuse of dredge material, and general flood mitigation. So we've got that underway. All that money is geared to be funneled to the businesses that are participating in this, that I'll explain in a little bit. We just received notice. We got a little over $2 million from the US DOT RAISE program to queue up several dozen designs for improvements to our long neglected public working waterfronts. They were designed when sea level was a foot lower, and there was a drastic need for a facelift there that's more resilient and preparing it for the next generation of flooding it's going, all those facilities are going to experience. We've got $1.5 million to advance a dredging project, which has beneficial reuse. We're actually looking into purchasing a municipal dredge and running our own operation where we'll be able to drive reuse projects throughout the region. We've got one grant that's going to help us pilot what we're calling the next generation shoreline designs. That's designs that not only look at the current needs, but also longer term. What can this shoreline hold up to elevated sea levels, increased frequencies of storms and intensities? And even it's building the next generation of coastal homes. We've got 130,000 from the Virginia General Assembly to bring new residential septic system products into the marketplace in Virginia. We're talking about elevating entire septic systems out of the floodplain, just like you would every other utility on any residence. We've got $1 million to develop resilient, affordable workforce housing for the watermen and waterwomen who need to live and work on the water. So that's underway. It's doing stuff. It's doing a lot of different stuff. And here's some examples of some other grant awards we've gotten for various shoreline projects. And we also have loan funds, like I've mentioned, and we're constantly putting those loans out. The money's coming back. It's rolling. We have created a machine for folks that are ready to just take a loan and do a project. So who can participate and how does it work? Simply put, any resident of the Middle Peninsula can log on for free, take about 10 to 15 minutes and tell us what their flooding need is, what their problem is. Same for any local government. All of the local government plans that many of you have, we constantly direct our local government staffers if they have a plan and it has a conceptual project, you plug it in to fight the flood, and we are positioned to make that project happen. So it's public property and private property. Anybody can play in this space. And these next couple slides kind of lay out how it works. So the whole idea here is we wanted to create an organized marketplace and an organized water management industry for our region. And so we're bringing together consumers that are filling out the intake forms, and we're bringing in companies that are vetted by us. So we've kind of set the stage for all the magic to happen, if you will. We provide all these different things within the marketplace. This is the homepage of the website itself. We made it very simple. You can either come through the door as a property owner or come through the door as a contractor or consultant. And we also made it the option to who wants a grant or a loan to get your project done. We put that up front and center, considering that 9 out of 10 people want some help from the government to get these projects done. They're just so costly. And there's really a couple different levels of the program that are offered here. The simplest, which many of you all are doing now, is just simply educating the community. We use it as a tool to educate and outreach to our folks. The second is to educate and connect the community. So we've solved the problem of, I don't know who to call for my shoreline need or for this or for that. We, like I said, we vet businesses. We put them on this website, and anybody who just needs to get a project done now has an easy way to call somebody up and know they're getting a quality contractor for any kind of service related to water management and hazard mitigation. And then this is really where the rubber meets the road. That's great, but how do you actually get projects done? And that's the protect the community side. So first, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you come in through the door as a business owner. You basically log on. There's all kinds of information about what the program is, how it works. They give us some general information, background of their business. We want to make sure they have a local business license. They're of a certain class of a contractor, things like that. We don't want Joe, who just rented a backhoe from Home Depot for the weekend, is out there saying that's not who's in the Fight the Flood program. And they, at the very least, they get some free advertising, but at the very best, we are creating pipelines for all of these funds that we've put into this. All these projects that we're queuing up through this process are connected via pipelines to these businesses. When you come in through the door as a property owner, that same kind of background, a lot of information about flood insurance, understanding risk of your property, what are your options, and then the majority of the work is in the tools. What financing tools are available to you? And that's all the stuff I just laid out. We've got the loans and grant options. But then the most important piece is this intake form. And anybody can fill this out. Like I said, you provide some general information about where your property is, who you are, who owns it, what tax map number are you on, and then you fill out a couple of kind of geographic specific questions. There's a series of questions related to, do you have flooding problems on your infrastructure at your property? Do you have flooding problems related to stormwater and upland or inland flooding on your property? Shoreline questions. And then navigability and shoaling issues as well. So we've run the whole gamut of problems on anybody's property. And there's a series of customized questions that let us understand not only what their problem is, but where they are in the resilience journey. Some people have they know they have a problem. All these folks know they have a problem. Some folks have no idea what to do about it. Some folks already have permit in hand. And then there's a bunch of folks in between. All these questions capture that information and allow us to meet them where they are to help get them to the finish line. And so once they submit the form on the back end, this is what it looks like on our GIS platform. This is how we manage it on the back end. The green, we pull up layers that show low income areas for grants that help us determine what match ratios certain projects would require under specific grants, things like that. The blue is the federal disaster funding areas that I talked about, where we can go to those folks in the red dots and say, do you want a living shoreline? And every red dot is essentially a story and a need that someone in our community has said, I need help. And we've got federal opportunity zones. So that's how we manage it on the back end. And like I said, every dot tells a story here. They submit pictures. We get all this information, and we're essentially for all the folks, which is the majority of folks who say they want a grant to help with their problem. They're essentially auto-populating grant applications when they fill out these questions. They don't even realize it. We've automated the entire process from top to bottom in a systematic fashion. And we screen it on the back end. So as grants become available, we have the ability to screen all the dots and all the needs and say, you are eligible and could be competitive for this type of grant. And so here's one instance where we got a NIFWIF award for a living multi-parcel living shoreline project. And just to give you an example of how we put all these tools to work to actually get to the finish line and make a project happen. We applied for the grant. We were awarded the grant. We first used the grant funds to design the project and walk through the permitting process. Once we got the permit in hand, we run into the problem that most of you are going to encounter as you go down the plan integration and implementation pathway. All these grants, the vast majority of these grants are reimbursable grants, meaning somebody's got to pay for it up front before you can actually access the grant funds. Many folks can't afford to float a $250,000 living shoreline project. These projects are hugely expensive. And so that's where the utility of our loan funds comes into play. people, in this instance, the property owners took out a short-term loan from our Living Shoreline Revolving Loan Fund, paid for the project, handed that money to the contractor, paid for the project, got the receipts in hand, handed it back to us. We submit those receipts to NIFWIF in this instance. NIFWIF then sends the money back, the grant money back to us. We give it to the property owners who use that money to pay off the loan. Project is done. That's how the project. That's the utility of the loan funds from the grant aspect. Hugely important. And pressed for time to get into a lot of details on all this, but just some key takeaways of what we're trying to do here. We recognize that this approach is very different. We have taken away the challenges we saw with elected officials during the planning processes, saying that the Smiths property was more important or of higher priority than the Joneses property. Local elected officials, especially in rural areas, are not going to get into that space. But when you look at it through the lens of protecting the tax base, all properties are important. Any need expressed on any property is important when you're looking at it through that lens. So it's very purpose-driven from that standpoint. Funding programs are not generally equipped for this systematic approach. We got very tired of the one and done traditional approach to grants where, 2 years or so would go by, we'd get one project done on one publicly owned parcel. The governor would come out, we'd cut the ribbon, and everybody pat themselves on the back, and then we cross our fingers that maybe 2 years down the road we can knock out another parcel. It just wasn't going to move the needle. It's insufficient. A systematic approach has got to be the only way in order to keep pace with sea level rise and all the flooding needs we have. And on the private side, the traditional model was that there just weren't enough projects moving forward to accomplish the same thing. The same challenge existed on private projects. Spending grant dollars on private land is new to many grant programs, but we urge everybody to be patient. We feel like the tip of the spear with a lot of grant agencies we work with, but we recognize resiliency as a public need project. When you look at it through the lens of the tax base, every property is important. Every property is a link in the chain to holding your community together. And that, in our mind, justifies the expenditure of public dollars on private property, especially when over 99% of your property in your region is privately owned. The wholeness of programmatic thought is imperative for this approach. I think that's pretty straightforward when you listen to what I'm saying here today. And the rural need is not the same as suburban or urban need. We just do not have the same public infrastructure as suburban and urban localities do. And so you've really got to be able to meet every property owner where they are to get the job done. And I'll just end there. But if anybody is interested in learning more about this program for your locality, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you all. We've got a couple questions already. Kurt, one for you that's come in off the bat here from Bonnie. With the Fight the Flood program, how do you outreach to those who are not as web savvy or less technical in getting equal access to the grants or loans?
We do hold, community specific kind of recruitment events, I guess you would say, where we'll go to the local library, we'll go to the local church, and invite those folks to come out, and we'll sit down with the laptop and we'll fill out the form for them.
Okay.
That's been our best approach so far.
And then in a somewhat similar vein, if the funding programs are focused on the highest taxable value land, how do you ensure equity for the low and moderate income landowners?
That's a good question. But you got to come at it from the standpoint of our localities do not have the capital to invest in these projects. So we are largely reliant on grant funds to get these projects done. And as I say all the time, with regards to our prioritization, our priorities are the grant funders' priorities. If there is a pot of money out there that wants to make something happen in our backyard, we are going to go after that money. And so the more pots of money that become available to help those at the greatest need, the better we will be able to get to those persons. But I will say one major challenge with every grant fund that wants to get to the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, which are the lowest income, elderly, so on and so forth, is the geographic area. Most of the grant programs require that a project be within a specific geographic area, often tied to a census block, census tract, so on and so forth. But everybody knows within that area, there's rich and poor people and everybody in between there. So it is still hard to get to those people within an area. The best approach is an income asset test. If you truly want to help poor folks vulnerable to flooding or sea level rise, income asset testing is the best solution. And very few programs in the resilient space utilize that, which is ironic when, similar housing grants do it all the time. It does not make sense to us why for other community development type projects aimed at those populations, income asset testing has been around for decades, but resilience has not caught up to that.
It seemingly would make sense. Again, this is talks to the need for the integration, not only in planning, but also in the tools across the various industries. Debbie, I'm going to swing back to you. This is a question that you had answered in the chat, but just if we could touch on it again for the benefit of everybody here, related to the funding sources that you guys utilize for the Resilience Authority, and specifically talking about your utilization of the ARPA funds as well. Can you just go into a little bit of detail on that for everybody?
Sure. We were lucky to have the commissioner set aside a certain amount to get the Resilience Authority started, but also to take a portion of the ARPA funds. The ARPA funds do have the ability to use some of them for infrastructure. And so what our commissioners did was to set aside a certain amount. And Beth, I'm not sure if you have the number right off your head, because I know you know those things.
Yeah, it's just under 11 million. So it's between 10 and 11.
Okay, so they set aside between 10 and $11 million for resilience projects. Now, some projects will be things that the county wants to do, and there will be some things that the Resilience Authority will want to do, but they have the ability to tap into those funds through their connection with the county. So it's been very helpful. Again, we just have started, but to have those funds available is imperative to success.
And can you, I guess this is going to be a very specific one to you guys, but what documentation, what plans did you guys have in place to help use to justify the use of the ARPA funds to the commissioners to help spur them to use the funding in that way?
Beth, I'm going to throw that one to you because it's your plans that hasn't done it. She wrote them all. Go ahead.
Well, when you ask what plans, I mean, really, I think the commissioners designated the funds based on the sort of the issues that have risen to the top for them. And so our stormwater issues with the private property, I mean, they received those calls firsthand from our residents. One of the other big portions of the funding is going for rural broadband. So that's also a huge initiative in our county. We'd already gotten a $3 million grant to start implementing that project through 2 of our rural areas. And then the ARPA funds came along and they were able to designate more to continue that program. So, I mean, really, for, I believe, our commissioners, it was not necessarily plans that dictated how we used our ARPA funds, but really just kind of the issues that are at the top of their minds and the residents' minds right now.
Okay. Swinging back to you, Kurt, we've got a question from Mary Bennett asking, how do you make the match when you're paying for the whole project from the grant?
Yeah, we have a lot of ability with all the tools we've created to generate match. One thing I'll note is, since we act as the banker with our loan fund, every loan we give out and every dollar that comes back in is eligible match. And so we knew that going into it, and we saw that as one of the biggest opportunities was to create this match machine out of our loan fund and be able to leverage more projects. So, but every project is different. So in terms of how do you create match for the poorest people? That is another thing that holds up many projects for those that are most vulnerable. Is that, we go in for like a living shoreline design at like $10,000 to $15,000, and for many grants that would be a couple $1,000s in match just to design a project. People cannot afford that when you're living on limited amount of money every month, let alone even doing $100,000 or a $200,000 project. So what we say time and again is for the poorest and the most vulnerable citizens, why are we even requiring match? Especially for projects of this magnitude, where you're expecting them to pay, $100,000 to $250,000 for a shoreline. It's just, it's a big flaw in the system, but match is a key thing in what we consider in our program.
Makes sense. One more back for Debbie and Beth. Can you talk a little bit about your dashboard that you guys have coming on to help facilitate communication with the public as far as your prioritization process on the modeling?
Sure. I'm envisioning that with our consultants as a GIS dashboard, an interactive kind of thing where we're going to put up our processes and the contents of the model and the criteria and how we weighted them. And why things have turned out the way they have. Why are you ranked number 5 and not number 1? That's going to be their number 1 question. It also allows them to see from the get-go, am I even on the list? And if I'm not on the list, what is the avenue by which we can contact? So they can use that dashboard to contact us as well. And that's the way it is envisioned.
Terrific. Laura, if you're around, I'm going to turn this one last question over to you and then look to turn it over to you. But you answered in the chat, but if we can just build on it a little bit. Michelle had asked about, these are great examples from coastal communities, but looking for examples from non-coastal communities of resiliency plans and planning. And you had mentioned Nashua, New Hampshire, and was hoping you could give a little bit more detail on that. And then I'll turn it over to you for the summary.
You bet. So yeah, I just mentioned that there is a PAS report that came out a little bit earlier on the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard, which some of you all may be familiar with. There was also a paper that was produced as part of the early proof of concepts on plan integration, and we'll have a link to that paper as well. So the two cities that were used as proof of concept for this was Norfolk and also Nashua, New Hampshire. So I'd encourage you to look at those reports. Also, if folks know of other plan integration work that's going on, we know of a little bit that's going on in other locations that are not within the tidal influences, if you will. But if there's others that you know of, just put them in the chat. And it's also a great segue to our next webinar. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So here's some of the additional resources that we have. I mentioned the PAS memo, which has some more information about use of plan integration scorecards that you can look at for this type of work. Also something that was produced a couple of years ago by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is the Regional Resilience Toolkit. And then we have the Runoff Rendezvous Panel on Resilient Communities that was done by Chesapeake stormwater folks. And then some of those examples I talked about, you can look at the 2 cities that were used in the proof of concept pilots. And then we've got the links for the conversations that we had today. And then funding. So all these links you're going to find on the resource page for the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration when we're done today. And then equity resources. Some of the things that were mentioned already is the SVI, the CDC's tool, and there's also EJ Screen if folks are familiar with that one. And all those resources, again, like I said, will be up on the website after the presentation today. So advertisement for the next topic, which is going to actually continue what we talked about a little bit today. On March 17th, we're going to go to West Virginia with the West Virginia APA sponsoring a deep dive into hazard mitigation and community rating systems. So that'll be an interesting link between hazard mitigation and community rating systems. So that's coming up March 17th at 12 noon. Anything else to go over today? If not, I thought this was fantastic. What a wonderful opportunity to learn about plan integration and 2 great examples of this. And I encourage everybody to look at the resources after they're posted today. And I'll see you next month.
Yeah, Laura, just one more thing to chime in. Martina had put in there the link to the page which shows this webinar series. If you go there as well, if you missed the first one, it'll take you to a link to a YouTube recording of it, so you can go back and watch it as well. And it'll have the registration links about the future ones, so that you can sign up in advance for those and be ready to learn more.
All right, we're in a little bit early, but that's okay.